Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, today, we're tackling foreign exchange challenges for businesses going global, essential in today's interconnected markets. Our topic, the three questions cross-border businesses should ask before they engage in overseas clients or suppliers. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions Podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. On this episode of the podcast, we're going to turn our attention to foreign exchange, or FX, and it is the backbone of international trade, involving the conversion of currencies for payments, investments, and risk management. For cross-border businesses engaging in overseas clients or suppliers, this means navigating methods like SWIFT, SEPA, or specialized platforms to minimize costs and delays. Simply put, FX strategies are key to competitiveness. We're going to address these strategies as we explore the three questions cross-border business should ask before they engage in overseas clients or suppliers. Joining me is Tony Roondo. Tony is a fractional currency consultant and founder of Cosmos Currency Exchange, which was established back in 2020 amid the pandemic. What a great time to start a new business, Tony. With over 39 years of experience in financial services, starting back in the City of London post 1985 Big Bang deregulation, Tony is qualified as an associate of the Chartered Institute of Bankers from Goldsmith University in 1992. His career spans recessions and market shifts, and he's emphasized relationship-driven services over transactional models. Key to my heart here. Cosmos, he provides bespoke FX and payment solutions for UK and global clients, earning awards like Customer Service Excellence and Currency Exchange Service of the Year. Tony, third time's a charm. You made it onto the podcast. And by the way, you'll be noted as the very first non-North American guest, because you're coming in all the way from which town in Wales? Where are you?
I'm very close to that. I'm in Truro in Cornwall, extreme southwest of the UK.
Right on. Well, welcome to the podcast, and great that you're here. And we had a couple attempts to get you on the podcast, but we had to recalibrate, and probably, given all the craziness that's been going on in the world, I know initially it was kind of a disappointment because we were planning on doing this earlier in the year, but given all that's taken place here in the last little while, maybe, the higher powers out there know better.
That's right. Absolutely.
So before we get into the questions, though, I got to ask the question, what sparked your passion for foreign exchange or FX? And on that, and I guess as a follow-up, how since then has the FX industry evolved from your early days till now?
Sure. Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I'm a regular listener to the podcast. I particularly enjoyed the recent episodes with Carl in Canada and one in Mexico. Obviously, anything with an international dimension is close to my heart.
Thank you so much.
I guess I was born to be in the FX market. And the reason I say that, Wayne, is that I was born in Mozambique in Africa to Portuguese parents. And we then emigrated to the UK when I was a child. I then had a 17-year career in the City of London. I then had spells working, travel the world. I worked for a spell in Vancouver. I worked for a spell in Melbourne in Australia. And I worked for 4 years in Portugal before returning to the UK in 2006.
You've had a truly global life, Tony. There's no question about that.
I certainly have. The biggest change that I've seen in my 40-year career now is that the world has sped up. When I first started, there were no computers, there was no internet, there was no email. And I think more importantly, bank managers were bank managers who knew their clients. So the only game in town was personal service. The only choices were we went to the client or the client came to us. But everything was face-to-face or telephone. Nowadays, of course, it's much more transactional. Nowadays, it's all about speed of execution. It's about a one-size-fits-all business model. And, my mum was a seamstress. And I remember her saying to me, one size fits all doesn't fit anybody well.
Yes. Well said. I love that.
And, I
One
often
size
think
fits
about
all
that.
doesn't fit anyone well. Boy, oh boy, if that
Um,
couldn't ever be used, if that can't be used in the financial services industry, I don't know where. That's classic.
exactly, exactly right. And I often think of her words. Sadly, she passed away a few years ago, and I often think of her words of wisdom. And because it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
You
amazing. Well, it's
cannot.
amazing how our parents, who we didn't think really knew that much when we were kids, turned out to be sages. I will know.
Absolutely,
Interesting.
absolutely. No, exactly right. Exactly
So,
right.
so, regarding, okay, you talked about this. I want to get back to it. Regarding the role of a foreign exchange specialist like yourself, what, in
Mm,
your opinion, we'll call it what is the missing element, at least from a service perspective, for individual, consumers or clients that are looking for advice on Forex transaction? And
yeah.
I'll just add this next layer. Based again on your experience, how do these services differ for the individual client who, confession,
Yeah.
those are the ones who I probably work with the most, versus a
Mhm.
solo entrepreneur, and then compare them to a
Yeah.
mid-size importer?
Sure.
And
Sure.
I guess, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, why go beyond why would you go beyond banks for Forex
Mm,
needs, right? Is it all rate
sure.
driven? So I know I gave you a lot there, but just maybe chew on that for a couple minutes.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Thank you. So clients these days, whether you're an individual or a solopreneur or a medium-sized enterprise or business, unless you are high net worth, you will not get personalized service. When I first started, everybody received personalized service. There was nothing else. Now you've got to be a high net worth individual or you've got to be a certain size company. For example, in the UK, unless the company is turning over at least £500,000 a year in foreign exchange, the mainstream banks and apps do not want to know. They can't be bothered. They're just not interested. So what happens is, and the challenges are the same for any client, whether they're an individual or a solopreneur or a company. The challenges are that the banks have very big overheads. They have outdated technology. So therefore, the banks make money on hurdles. The more hurdles they put in front of the client, the more charging opportunities for the bank. So it's not in the bank's interest to provide a seamless service. It's very much in the bank's interest to provide as disjointed a service as possible because
Complexity,
that
provide
increases
complexity.
exactly because that increases their charging opportunities. A very simple example, I picked up a business client last week who was based in South Africa with clients in Poland. So she'd been dealing with the banks forever. And this is a very typical route for clients. She'd been dealing with the banks, got fed up, asked around. Somebody told her about some payments app. She started using them, slightly better, slightly faster, but then got introduced to me by her accountant. And what both the bank and the app had been offering her is the fact that they couldn't do a direct transfer between Poland and South Africa. So what they had to do is do two transactions from Polish zloty to sterling and sterling to the South African rand.
I see
Well,
an opportunity to generate some revenue right there. I don't know.
there you have it.
Ding, ding,
So
ding.
there you have it. All of a sudden, there's two charging opportunities instead of one transaction. There's two transactions. The reality is there are very few currencies in the world that cannot be directly converted. And they certainly do not include the Polish zloty and the South African rand, which of
Hmm.
course can be directly converted.
Would that be no
So what
fun?
you, yeah, exactly, just cut down on half your profit. The
Yeah.
other issue is the business model of the apps, of these payment apps, like you guys have got Stripe, amongst others, our side of the pond. You've got people like Wise and Revolut and
Yeah,
Monzo,
we hear about
amongst
Wise over
others.
here. Yeah.
Um, the good news with the apps like Wise is their technology is newer and faster than the banks, and they don't have such big overheads. But they still have overheads. But there's no difference in the business model. Their business model is reactive, transactional, and one size fits all. All we are, whether you're an individual, a solopreneur, or a business, we're all just data entries. There is no client differentiation. What what I saw as a gap in the market and decided to set up Cosmos in 2020 is to treat everybody like the individual they are, so that there's always a solution that will make more sense to Wayne Baxter than other possible solutions. But without a discussion and without a thorough knowledge of the market and what's available in the market, all that happens is Wayne's a busy guy. He's got 1,000 things to do. When it comes to make a payment or receive a payment, he's just going to go on an app or contact the bank, and whatever the rate is whatever the rate is. And that's how most people work. The problem with that approach, Wayne, is that you leave a lot of money on the table. You leave a huge amount of money on the table per se. Then you get into the complexities of, let's say you are working with an overseas client on a 6-month contract. They're going to pay you in their native currency. If you don't, if you leave yourself open, the rates could change in such a way that you finish the work, you then bill him, he pays you the agreed amount,
But
but the
there's been
agreed
a change in
amount,
the foreign exchange value, and you're going to get
he got it.
95% of what you thought you were going to get paid.
And sometimes you might not even cover your costs, and your profit has just disappeared into the market. But if you go on these payment apps, there is no room for forward contracts. It's not an option. It needs a human being to discuss with you what's best for you and the ability to suggest, look, in these circumstances, you might want to consider a forward contract so you haven't got an open-ended commitment in the market where the market, a rate going against you could completely wipe out your profit. It needs
Well,
the human touch.
it was interesting that we're having this conversation, in particular, you mentioned Portugal, because literally just before
Mhm.
we started this podcast, I was talking to a Florida-based property and casualty insurance specialist, and her question was, could I help a client that's looking to relocate from the US to Portugal? So
How
here we are.
interesting.
Here we are.
You know, we do. I've done so much business between those two countries in the last 2 years. The interesting thing, and I'm Portuguese by parentage. So up until 2 years ago, the number of Americans relocating to Portugal, the number of Americans in Portugal wouldn't have hit the top 20 by nationality. Now they're second only to the British.
Huh. Yeah, and they
There's
drive on the
been,
same side of the road too, which makes life
that's
easier.
right.
Yeah.
And the Algarve, which is the
I've
bottom
been.
part of Portugal,
I've been to Faro and
there
Albufeiro.
you go.
The best
I
mackerel
understand it's called the
salad I ever had.
California of Portugal.
Yeah, I the best mackerel salad I ever had in my life was in Albufeiro, Portugal.
Absolutely. Now we're talking.
Unbelievable. Oh my God, that was good. And we stayed at a place up in the Citrus Mountains near Lisbon called Penalonga. It's a resort,
Yes, I
a
know
Ritz
it.
Carlton resort up. Oh my God, the place was spectacular. That's back in,
Yeah.
can't believe it. That was 20 years ago, but what a place. It was
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Tony, let's dive into our questions. Our topic today is the three questions cross-border businesses should ask before they engage overseas clients or suppliers. So, are you ready? Long
I'm
last, here we
ready.
go. Question number one. And again, these are from the perspective of the entrepreneur. I am trying to send a payment to an Italian supplier. What is the best payment method? Tony, we'll start off with an easy one for you. Take it away.
Okay, well, the bottom line in the foreign exchange world, as you know, Wayne, is that it's all relative. So, question is best for who? Best for the bank, or best for the sender, or best for the receiver? So, there are two basic options. The first option is the traditional, let's call it the traditional route, where you use a bank or an app. You would then send the money to Italy in US dollars, or you would ask the bank or the app to convert dollars to euros. But the monies will be sent by the global SWIFT payment system. And everybody uses the global SWIFT payment system. It's very good globally, but there are wrinkles in it. And one of the wrinkles is that when the euros arrive in Italy, let's say you buy 50,000 euros to send to your supplier. You pay for 50,000 euros. The bank or the app are going to charge you pretty hefty margins. I mean, Stripe are probably the best available in the US, and they charge 3.5% margins plus fees. The banks charge between 5 and 7.
Yep, I know that one.
I don't even want
Personal
to tell you
experience.
what, absolutely, what
Called
PayPal or
a
Western
rude
Union
awakening.
charge.
Yeah, fun.
Exactly. So first of all, you get whacked on the exchange rate. So that's the deficit on your side. You get a terrible exchange rate. You don't get any service. Basically, you make contacts on a Tuesday afternoon. They will do the conversion on the Tuesday afternoon. They don't ask you when do the funds need to be in Italy. Is all your cash flow available? What's your attitude to risks? Are you risk averse or have you got an appetite for risk? Because there's no dialogue, because there's no customer contact. So it's done completely transactional, it's done completely reactive with big overhead. So not a great deal for the sender, but it's also not a great deal for the receiver because you might send 50,000 euros, but they will not receive 50,000 euros because if you send it by Swift, there'll be all kinds of intermediary charges along the way. And they're going to receive 49,700 euros and then send you an email saying,
Hey, I'm
Mr.
short.
Baxter, uh, you're supposed to pay the full amount. And then you try and send another 300 euros, but they only receive 250, and onwards and onwards and
Bit of a
onwards it
negative
goes.
feedback loop happening here.
Exactly. The alternative is, for example, the way we operate at Cosmos is very simple. We do a client discovery call with each client to find out about them, their circumstances, their requirement, their time frame, their cash flow, their attitude to risk, and so on. And then we say, okay, let's have a think. So the sender is in the United States, the receiver is in Europe. So what suits the sender is not to have to go to the bank to send the dollars overseas, because that's a time out of the office, that's parking, that's queuing up at the bank, filling out a form, $50 charge. So first of all, for convenience, let's have a dollar account inside the United States that a client can pay into, because then they can go online and do an ACH bank transfer free of charge in their own sweet time. So that's the most convenient for the sender. And make sure that we don't charge 3.5% or 5 or 7. Let's charge 1%. That covers our costs plus a little more, and we build a relationship. Because ultimately, we don't know who Wayne Baxter knows. And if we look after Wayne, chances are he'll use us forever, and he might even refer a few people to us. Then let's have a look about the receiving end. The receiving end, they're in Italy. Italy are part of the European Union, which has their own payment system called SEPA. So let's convert the dollars. So let's find out from the sender when the funds need to be in Italy. In that time frame, let's monitor the markets to see when the dollar is strongest against the euro within that time frame, so that the euros cost the smallest amount of dollars possible for the client, sender. And then let's send the euros by SEPA so that when Wayne buys 50,000 euros and pays for 50,000 euros, guess what? Because we've sent it by SEPA, it's seen as a domestic payment, and the Italian supplier receives 50,000 euros.
So just for the folks listening in here, what is SEPA short for?
SEPA is the single European payment area.
Okay. Just thought I would double check for folks listening in.
Absolutely.
I remember when
I had to think about that.
Tony, back when I used to have my radio show in Toronto, the folks that used to run the radio station were always telling us, don't use acronyms.
Yeah,
In Canada, there's an investment it's offered by the banks called a GIC. Everybody knows what they are. They're interest certificates, income certificates, GICs, guaranteed income certificate. And we would say GIC on the radio, and invariably before the next episode, I would get a call from the station manager saying, "Don't use acronyms. Say exactly what you mean." People don't know what they are. So
it's true. Yeah, jargon.
Okay. So SEPA again is, say it one more time.
Single European payment area.
All right. Okay. So with that in mind, I got to ask this question. You talked about all these ways, the complexity, and you just layered on and then took up all the places for potential adding on of expenses. But I have to ask this question because we live in a regulatory world. How much effect do the regulators have on when you make a choice, whether it's SEPA or SWIFT or whatever? Like, did the regulators involved in any of this way? Is there a regulatory component here that we haven't chimed in on?
Yes, there is, and it's universal. So it doesn't matter if you send the money by SWIFT or SEPA. It doesn't matter if you're in the UK and you use the Faster Payment Network or the EFT payment network in Canada. It's universal, and that is for the sender. The sending entity has to confirm 4 things: that they are who they say they are, that they reside where they say they reside. They have to confirm the source of funds that for the dollar payment are clear, and the reason for the trade is legitimate. So it's not terrorist funding, etc., etc.
So that's more of a reporting. That's more of a reporting matter than it is a fee-related matter, though, is it not? That's a regulatory. Or is there?
Yeah, from the UK point of view, in the UK, we see it as part of the compliance umbrella, and it doesn't matter what payment network you use. You've got to do this work. And then on the receiving end, again, the receivers have got to be checked out that they're legitimate receivers, and it's a legitimate entity, and the bank account exists, and all the rest. So there is a cost component. Compliance is quite rightly, we're very heavily regulated in the payments industry, and quite rightly so, because we're dealing with people's money. An interesting little by note of this, always makes me smile when people say, for example, and I understand why they ask it, but they go, yeah, I can understand you've been around a long time, Tony, and I can clearly hear that you're quite experienced. But here's the thing: I've heard of Citibank, I've heard of Bank of America, I've heard of JP Morgan, but who on earth is Cosmos Currency Exchange? How do I know my money's safe? Here's the interesting thing. In the United States, federal law says that bank deposits, qualifying bank deposits up to $100,000 are guaranteed.
That's right.
In the UK, £120,000. In Europe, €125,000. So above that, but here's one thing the banks never tell you, and I'll have to use British examples because they're the ones sort of I can recall off the top of my head. What they don't tell you is that let's say that you've got £200,000 in the UK, Wayne, and you've got £100,000 with the National Westminster Bank and £100,000 with Royal Bank of Scotland. If you're none the wiser, you'd think, okay, well, each deposit is below the 120,000 limit, so you're totally safe.
That's
No, you're
exactly what
not.
I was. That was exactly what I was. The conclusion.
But you're
However,
not. You're not because NatWest own Royal Bank of Scotland. Therefore, they share the same banking license. So you're only covered for 120. If either of those banks falls, you're going to lose £80,000 straight away. That's because they're regulated by the Prudential Regulation Authority, which is part of the Bank of England. Cosmos is not a bank. We are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the UK regulator in the FX space. To be fully authorized in my space, you need to make sure that all client funds, irrespective of amount or denomination, are held in protected, segregated accounts. So you could have your £200,000, euros, dollars, Swiss francs, whatever it is with me. And if something goes wrong with Cosmos, you are fully protected because my creditors can only get to our funds in our office account. They'll never touch yours because yours are in a client segregated account by law. So you're much more protected using an authorized brokerage like Cosmos than you are the bank. The only issue is they've got they're in a public space and we're not so much. But you're actually more protected using us.
interesting. So our topic today is the 3 questions cross-border businesses should ask before they engage in overseas clients and supplier. Joining me is Tony Roondo, and Tony is a fractional currency consultant and founder of Cosmo Currency Exchange. Tony, great having you here. Very interesting, very educational. Let's move on to question number 2. Again, these are questions being posed by entrepreneurs, business owners.
Mhm.
And here we go. Question number 2. I recently engaged a client from the UK, and it's now time to send them an invoice. What is the recommended method for receiving payment from them? Okay, Tony, we'll see how your answer differs from the answer to question number 1, where we were looking to pay.
Yeah. So so you are receiving money. You want to bill. Sorry, let me rephrase. You want to bill a client in the United Kingdom.
Correct.
So normally, again, the 2 options. First option, go down the normal route of using a bank or a payment app. The bank or the payment app would send the invoice out in US dollars because that's your native currency. That puts all the currency risk on the sender. Now, the good news for the sender is that the UK has the most competitive currency markets in the world. So the margins the British banks charge are around about 2 to 4%, not 5 to 7. So it's more competitive, still outrageous, just less outrageous than the American
4%
banks
is pretty
charge.
out there as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly
And
right.
I imagine the
Exactly
4%
right.
is more likely going to be charged for the smaller on the scale of things. I'm
Yes,
imagine there's a
precisely. Precisely. It's all volume driven. Again, the same problems as you have with the first one in terms of charges, inconvenience of going to the bank, the reactive one size fits all business model, all the same issues arise with this payment. The second option, they come to a specialist service like Cosmos, where we'll say, okay, when do you need to receive the payment by, Wayne, from the client in the UK? X. Okay. When a client registers with Cosmos, we give them access to over 35 currency accounts in London. the ability to send and receive payments to and from over 50 countries around the world. Plus, we have a total of 6 local collection accounts. So clients in the UK can pay into accounts in London. Clients in the European Union can pay into an account in Brussels. Clients in the United States can pay into an account in Delaware. Clients in Australia have Australian accounts to pay into, Singapore and in Hong Kong. And what we can then do is exactly the same as the first answer, is we will monitor the markets to try and get the timing as right as possible on the transaction. We can receive the payment from the UK client via the UK's faster payment network, which is the UK equivalent of the ACH payment network in the US. So the client can do it online, doesn't have to visit the bank, doesn't have to pay bank fees. We then convert the funds and we will send them to you by SWIFT, which means that when you receive the funds, you receive the full amount of the funds.
Interesting.
So to make life as simple as possible for both the sender and the receiver.
Well, I think you may have somewhat answered my question, because I was going to follow up and just say, from a general perspective, when you're transacting between the US and the UK, should businesses invoice in GBP or USD? Or, good Lord, hopefully not another currency. So if I am in the US and I want to invoice somebody in the UK, so would you advise to say, you know what, start off with Great Britain pounds when you invoice them, or would you say, no, you can go ahead and invoice them in USD? What would your recommendation be?
My recommendation is always do what's best for your client. And the reason I say that is I've had so much feedback over my long career where, say, a business in the UK, and particularly in the last 5 years, of course, one of the fantastic things, I mean, COVID and the lockdown was a terrible thing from a public health point of view. I lost family. So, it was a terrible time on a personal level and public health point of view. But from a business point of view, it became the first time in my working lifetime where geography didn't matter.
Yep.
It doesn't matter that you're in California. It doesn't matter that I'm in Cornwall. We can communicate as many times as we want with no travel time and no travel costs. Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. One of the benefits of that is that it's never been easier to have overseas clients and overseas suppliers. The problem tends to be in not getting them. The problem tends to be in keeping those relationships going. So an example I hear all the time from new clients. Oh, a British company gets a client in California. They love our product. They love our service. But after 3 to 6 months, they give up on us and go back to their local supplier. Why? Because the payment processing is so complicated, so expensive, such a hassle, that somewhere along that management chain, somebody's going to go, we really like
Why
that
are we
British
doing
company,
this?
but it's such a pain. Let's just go back to the local supplier. We can write them out a check. Done. So what I see is one of the fundamental roles that Cosmos can play is, look, I'm not a marketing expert. I can't necessarily help you win the business, but I can help you keep it. If I make life as simple as possible for the payer to pay and the receiver to receive, then providing that the sender's, the exporter's service is up to scratch, we're taking away the biggest excuse why relationships fail in cross-border trade and cross-border services. It's not the actual product. It's not the actual service. It's oh God, I'm in Kansas. My nearest bank is 3 hours away. Now I've got to drive 3 hours to get to the bank, to park up, to queue up, to fill out a form, to pay $50 to make a payment to the UK. And then I've got to get in a car and drive 3 hours back. That's 1 day a month out of my business to make one payment. Or I can write out a check to a local supplier. Sooner or later, there's a very good chance that they're going to go to the most convenient option. So if we can make international payments as convenient as local ones, then hopefully we can help our clients keep their international clients and international suppliers.
So like I have to go back. I'm gonna go back to the question though. So in the particular example, your answer was not wrong in that you said, well, I want to do what's in the best interest of my client. So let's pretend I'm the client and I'm the one who wants to invoice the supplier, people in the UK as an
Yeah.
as an American wanting to get paid in US dollars, going to invoice. Which way am I invoicing? Would you recommend, what would you say typically as a general rule of thumb? Would you recommend invoicing in the US currency where I am or in the UK currency where the provider is or where the client is, pardon me?
If
Is there a
what's
general
important,
rule of thumb?
it depends on how important that relationship is to you, is my honest answer, Wayne, because what's best for you is to get paid in dollars because that's your base currency. You then
Hmm.
don't have any currency risk. The problem is it puts the currency risk on the other end, and that might queer the relationship. So if it's a really important relationship, you want to make life as simple as possible for them. So you bill them in pounds sterling, but that puts the currency risk on you. So like a lot of things in the foreign exchange, it's all relative. If it's a standard relationship, bill them in dollars. It's their problem how they get the dollars, and you receive the dollars, no currency risk. If it's a new market or an interesting market or an interesting client that you see potential to
You
do
may give
great
them
things with,
consideration. It's a matter of giving them, yeah, I get it.
correct,
All right.
correct, 100%.
All right. Well, I'm glad got to the bottom of that one. I wasn't going to leave you without getting. Okay, this next question I have been waiting for the longest time. So here we go. This
Oh
is
dear.
gonna this is gonna be
Do I need a
good.
lawyer? Do I
Yes,
need a
well,
lawyer?
but we'll see. Maybe a regulator. As I'm looking into expanding I'm looking into expanding my business overseas. Foreign exchange is a huge consideration. What is the outlook for the USD in 2026?
Oh my
Yes.
Lord.
Yes. I
What
had
a
to
very
ask. The reason,
interesting.
I'll tell you
You
what,
had to ask.
I want to make a point. So as you probably know, I know some other people in the Forex business here
Mm,
in the United States in particular. And I find that their courage in terms of giving a response tends to become less and less, or they have much less confidence, not in terms of months, definitely not years, but in terms of weeks from the
mm.
point of asking. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say, or if you would like to decline comment. So, Tony, over to you.
No. Okay, never decline comment. That's a very, very fair question.
Fair enough.
Um, Very fair question. So where do I start with that one? I start
And I
with
think your answer, okay, I want to make chime in one more thing. Given where from the time we initially had scheduled this recording session to today, I wonder
yes,
how different your answer would be given all the excitement that we've had with, what's going
absolutely.
over in Europe with Greenland and
Yeah,
all the other stuff that's come up on the in discussion. So,
Venezuela.
yeah,
Yeah.
Venezuela. Okay, so away you go. I'm waiting to hear what
Okay.
your, and I'm probably going to have a multi couple of follow. This is going to provoke more questions, so be prepared.
So first things first, I started my career in 1985. And I was reading stories about the demise of the dollar in 1985.
Yes.
And I've been reading stories about the demise of the dollar for the last 41 years. But here's the brutal truth. The foreign exchange market has now grown to dwarf the stock markets and commodity markets combined. It turns over an average of $7.5 trillion a day, and 71% of all trades involves the US dollar. The next is the euro at 14%, followed by the Great British Pound at 11%. So, to my simple way of looking at things, this ever constant talk about the demise of the dollar is complete hogwash. The dollar is going nowhere. It's responsible for nearly 3/4 of all transactions. And there's a simple reason for that. Because it's not only the national currency of the biggest economy in the world, but it's the de facto reserve currency of the world, because every commodity is priced in dollars. Oil is priced in dollars, diamonds, gold, silver, soybeans, frozen orange juice, whatever you want. So the world simply has to deal in dollars. So I want to say that at the beginning, because what I'm about to say is going to have to, please bear in mind what I've just said. The dollar is going nowhere. The Chinese may talk about it. Do you know the overseas participation of the Chinese yuan is on a global basis? 2%. So the dollars are 71%, and the Chinese yuan has got 2% market share. The dollar's on safe ground for a few more millennia, I think.
Interesting.
Okay? So that's point number one. Point number two, in terms of the specifics between the US dollar and Canadian dollar, what's changed, and I actually looked at my notes before this recording, is I wrote some notes back in December when we started mooting about me coming on to this program. And at that point, the consensus of the market was for the dollar to have a pretty rough 2026, and for the dollar index to fall up to about 7%, with some banks, with only one bank being pretty bullish on the dollar, and that was Goldman Sachs. There were some very bearish banks like Mitsubishi, the biggest Japanese bank, and Morgan Stanley were very bearish as well. And there's all kinds of reasons: narrowing interest rate differentials, fiscal policy, global growth, and so on. In the last, call it 4, 5, 6 weeks, between when I first started discussing with you coming on and today, what's happened is the dollar has firmed up. Why? Because the American economy continues to outperform. Because the US stock markets are at record highs, and inflation is not rampant like 10 months ago with
Everybody were
Liberation
threatening
Day.
with tariffs. We're going to see rising inflation.
The world was going to end. And one of the things that, this is slightly as an aside, but I think it's worth making the point. Let's say a bank has 100 clients, but 90% of the bank's balance sheet is in loans to one client. If that one big client goes under, who's it a problem for? The client or the bank? The bank. And the reason I mentioned that, what's that got to do with foreign exchange? It's got everything to do with why, if you want quick headlines, if you want to, obtain clickbait on social media, talk about the demise of the dollar.
Or about U.S. or what about, okay, on that note, and I know we're kind of getting short on time here, but just one last point is not just the U.S. dollar, but U.S. treasuries. The idea that all the treasuries will
absolutely
they will not be the favored tool for lending going forward because of the angst with the current administration in the U.S. I've had that conversation recently.
Absolutely. I saw last week some ludicrous headlines about some Danish pension fund was going to pull its holding of US treasuries. And then all of a sudden there was these headlines about, there's going to be a run on US treasuries, blah, 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 blah. No, hold on a second. The liquidity is of a dimension that, first of all, it takes two sides to have a market. It takes a seller and a buyer. And if Europe has got the biggest concentration of US treasuries of anybody in the world, who's it going to sell it to? If nobody else wants to buy, number one. And number two, if you sell it at fire sale, what happens with the prices on the fire sale? They're a disaster. So who does he end up hurting? The Europeans more than the Americans. Because people will always want the dollar. You know, I make payments worldwide. As I said earlier, I can make payments and receive funds to and from over 50 countries around the world. So, but when I make a payment to the Philippines, I don't use the Philippine peso. Nobody wants the Philippine peso locally. Guess what they want? The US dollar.
dollars.
When I make payments from British companies using people in India, do they pay in Indian rupee? No, they don't. They pay in US dollar. What about in Africa? What about South America? Everybody wants the dollar because it's got the most liquidity. Therefore, it's the safest currency in the world. Doesn't mean that it hasn't got problems.
Okay, Tony. We're coming down to almost to the end here, but I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to wrap up. So, if again, this is with a tongue firmly in cheek here, but what would you, if you were talking to I have a lot of U.S. clients that have money in Canadian dollars, and I've got clients in Canada with money in U.S. dollars. Yeah. Would you care to take a quick stab at what you see going forward for the U.S. Canadian trade? Currently, it's hovering right around 72 cents U.S. We'll say 138 the other way. If you're sitting here, let's just say midsummer 2026, do you think we're going to be hovering right around the same? Do you see a move in either direction off of where we are now?
I see. So at the moment, it's currently trading at about 137, 138, as you said. I see a move in the second half of this year to sort of 132, 135.
Interesting. All right. I will be watching that. That would be worth a follow-up conversation. So, you know what? We're right up against the clock here. So I'm just going to ask one basic question before. And first of all, you've been amazing. Exceeded my expectations. So we got folks listening and watching in, as you know, across Canada, across the United States, and now potentially across the UK. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you? How can they contact you?
Very simply on the Cosmos website, which is www.cosmoscurrencyexchange.com.
Is excellent. Okay, well, listen, Tony, I want to thank you so much. You've been an awesome guest today. Tony Roondo is a fractional currency consultant and the founder of Cosmo Currency Exchange. Tony Roondo, thank you so much. You've been a great guest today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Wayne. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, too. I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast. I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive notification when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.